Hey everyone, and welcome to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Tara, and we are going to talk about Babylon 5, The Gathering. So, yeah, new Already Cancelled, coming to you, about a sci-fi show from the 90s by J. Michael Straczynski. If you're stumbling onto this, and if you're someone who's been on MailFuzz TV before, you've been here for a while, you're probably like, wait, didn't you review some of Babylon 5 before? Yes, I did. I'll explain at the end of this why we're starting from the start, but I want to get straight into it. So, without further ado, we'll do so. So, yeah, so we had been kind of looking at a different science fiction series to work through, and we're coming to the end of the new Twilight Zone, and we decided that we wanted to cover something else, and we decided on Babylon 5 for a number of reasons, mainly because it's got such an appeal, such a prestige amongst science fiction fans.
I was holding on to that word to use to compare it to Star Trek.
So, yes, I have seen the majority of season 1 before. Tara has seen a little bit of season 1 before.
I think I got like almost 20 episodes in.
Oh, really? Okay. All right, fair enough. Probably similar amount to me then. So if you've not been here before and you're just discovering us through Babylon 5, then for our credentials, as it were, I mean, at least myself with Connor, we've been working through Star Trek since the start of the original series, and we're in season 4 Next Generation right now, just to show you the commitment that we tend to keep with these things. Tara and myself have been doing classic Twilight Zone. We're almost done with season 2 of that. We started that early last year. So this is something that we intend to stick with and work through one episode per week, with one caveat to that. And we will keep going until we're done, and we'll do all the TV movies with it. We'll, all the stuff that's part of the journey. Starting here, of course, with The Gathering, which is not season 1, episode 1. This is a TV movie kind of. It's essentially just a double episode pilot, but it just isn't a part of season 1 officially. It's kind of a separate thing, which I guess was made as proof of concept. So we'll get into it. And the caveat I mentioned as far as when it might not be once per week is sometimes if we have another new show to cover, this and the classic Twilight Zone will alternate week to week whilst the other show's on, and then I'll go back to weekly afterwards. So that is the plan going forward. So as a big Star Trek fan, Tara, how familiar were you with this before trying it? And I guess you have to also address the fact that it's commonly been believed, or there was accusations, we'll say, when Deep Space Nine became a thing, that Babylon 5 served as an inspiration. I'll put it in the nicest possible way.
Yeah, I think Deep Space Nine technically came out first, but I have heard the accusations. It's hard not to see some of the similarities. I am a big Star Trek fan. I am especially a big fan of Deep Space Nine. And yeah, I mean, they're there. I remember them being more prevalent in the actual series in the episodes of season 1 that I did see. I kept things just kept popping up like, oh, that's very familiar. Even like character names would be the same. Like alien character names. Anyway. So, as far as how familiar I was with it, I really wasn't. As far as like science fiction shows go, I never really went outside my comfort zone of Star Trek when I was watching a lot of TV. I had heard of Babylon 5 just because I watched a lot of the Sci-Fi Channel, and I don't know if they played it on there or not, but it had to have been mentioned at some point. I don't remember the Prime TV channel you're talking about, but I feel like it was on.
Well, you were in Canada at the time.
Also.
Yeah, you were in Canada at the time. This was like a Warner Brothers network.
Well, they might have been like in syndication on the Sci-Fi Channel.
That makes sense. Because the final season is on TNT, I think. It switched because one of the few things I know about Babylon 5, about the sort of the larger end game. Obviously, we are not looking ahead at spoilers. We're going to discover this as we go, barring the things we've seen before, obviously. And we will keep this, obviously we'll have spoilers for each episode as we're reviewing them, but we're never going to talk about anything we might know from later, which is not much anyway, but just in case there is anything, we won't bring it up.
Yeah, I don't really remember too much from the episodes that I watched anyway, apart from certain characters.
Yeah. But the one thing I do know is that the show basically ends its story at the end of season 4 because they thought it was they thought that was the ending, and then season 5's kind of like a, oh hey, we got to come back for one more. Oh, we'll do all this stuff. So I know that season 5's not as loved. I know that 2, 3, and 4 kind of that might be the, you know, the pinnacle, the prime of Babylon 5.
Mm-hmm.
That's where all the love for it really comes from. And season 1, having seen a lot of it, like, is definitely kind of this. There's a lot of foundation for it, but it's not quite hit its stride yet, kind of thing. So it's one of those things I love about discovering and going through these old shows, is kind of going through that journey and seeing where it found its footing and where it kind of became the show that everyone loved. You know, I often bring up the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I think there's a moment in season 2 of that show where it becomes Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like really becomes like the level of quality and the reason why people, you know, if Buffy just did season 1 quality, which was fun, but if it just did season 1 quality the whole time, it wouldn't be remembered as fondly as it is today. I wouldn't have the.
I think most shows can be like compared to that analogy though, because like all the shows that I watched growing up were like, yeah, you can skip season 1, like even The Simpsons and yeah, of course all the Star Treks, with the exception of the original series. Yeah, a lot of shows could be compared to that way though.
True, but if I can compare something to the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I'm going to do it, and you should know that.
And if I can be critical of your analysis of Buffy, I will be.
Everyone tries. They keep coming. These critiques of my Buffy references keep coming, and I keep knocking them out the park because.
Do you now? Okay.
I think you'll find I do. Thank you very much. So, yeah. So obviously, this review is going to be about the Gathering, and one thing I do know about the show as well is that it's pretty well known for having a very long form storytelling, very sort of, you know, setting things up early on that don't get paid off until seasons later and things like that. It's a very
very new at the time, huh?
Yeah, a very in-depth mythology and world building, and even this like pilot movie, The Gathering, I think you can already sense, as much as some things do change when you go to the full season, and some actors obviously get swapped out or whatever. There's so much backstory set up in this 90-minute episode that you can tell there's some sort of game plan. That this is not just like, oh, I've thought of some wacky, you know, settings to put something in, and we'll figure it out as we go. Clearly, there's a whole idea. There's all these alien races. There's this history. There's a war that Earth was a part of. There's all these different things. So if it wasn't clear, full spoilers for The Gathering as we talk about it, and we'll dive into it. I think the main thing we're going to talk about this first episode though is the introduction of all the world and the like everything, because obviously we'll talk about quality. We'll talk about the plot of the episode, but probably the meat of this discussion is going to be, okay, what are the races? You know, who are these ambassadors? What is Babylon 5? Why are they here? The introductions to all these characters and what they're like. That, you know, episode 1 stuff, basically, is kind of thing. So, I suppose I'll say is, who's your favourite character out the gate? Like, which one stuck out to you? And why is it Londo?
Well, yeah, as far as The Gathering goes, it's definitely Londo. I mean, he's the most, like, he's probably the best actor in it. And he's also, I don't know, he's very, like, I don't want to say cartoonish, but he's got a lot going for him, you know. His character is very entertaining. He's funny. You could tell there's a side of him that is, you know, a little bit mischievous, but also, like, sincere and nice. Like, he doesn't want to do the wrong thing, but he has to do, like, I don't know, like, he's the most interesting character in The Gathering, for sure.
Yeah, I like Londo a lot. I think he's extremely entertaining. I love, and this is something I'm kind of remembering this from like later episodes, admittedly, but Londo and Jakar, like their relationship and their rivalry, I guess would be more accurate, is one of my favorite character things on the show. And even though there's not a lot of interaction with them in this first episode, like this episode does a really good job of setting up kind of who they both are and how they both kind of view their own cultures, and like. One of the big themes that's introduced immediately in this is that so Londo's part of the Centauri. That's his race, and they used to have this empire. They used to like conquer worlds, and one of the worlds that they conquered was the Narn homeworld, which is Jakar's race, and both of them are kind of fueled by this past. Jakar's very all about like I guess revenge is the word, but sort of making up for like past failures and dominance and wanting revenge on everyone who's ever done them wrong and appearing to be strong and appearing to be all these things. Whereas Londo's kind of like, the glory of the Empire, those were the days. Because even in this episode, you hear him, like, there's a one point he walks out of an elevator with Garibaldi. He's like, and their fleet was there, you could barely see the sun. And then he was, he's describing it very, passionately, lots of artistic flair in these descriptions. It really gives you a good idea of who he is. But he's also a gambler who sometimes asks Garibaldi for money.
Yeah,
so
he has his vices, which also makes him a more interesting character.
Yeah.
Always hanging out in whatever the Vegas part of the ship is.
Yes, we should also talk about how each of these different alien races look as well, because they all have distinct visual qualities.
Well, Lando's basically human, but he's got like a crest of hair. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a wall.
Yes, a wall. It's
like a waterfall that's upside down behind him.
I think the first time I tried to describe this, I said, imagine a mohawk but spun around.
Yeah, okay.
Not spiky, admittedly, but it's actually, do you know what it is? Like a big regal collar you get in like a sort of like yes. royalty jacket. It's that on his head, made out of hair. And
somehow it does make him look a little bit regal.
It does. It actually works. He looks like he looks like novelty, but it's at the same time though he has such this playful kind of mindset. Whereas Jakar, who's this also mischievous, but in a really kind of sly way, where he's always trying to get away with something. I really enjoy Jakar as well, and maybe the reason why I enjoy him is maybe more in the episodes to come than it is this first episode.
Yeah, I think this first one is like he's interesting and he's cool to look at. He's more of a design that you would see in like a Star Trek series.
Yeah, he's
more
very
familiar. Like this is what we can do with makeup and TV shows now. And
oh yeah, he's head to toe makeup. He's kind of, I guess, reptilian, maybe you'd sort of describe.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I think Klingon mixed with a reptile mixed with, I don't know.
I do really like the introduction we get to his personality when he's talking to later on in the film where he's talking to the telepath lady. I think that's his best scene, and it really says a lot about him when we get to that. But I do really enjoy his character because of that scene.
Yeah, Lita, Scar, who does come back, but she is absent after this episode. She comes back sometime later in the show. I believe, if I recall correctly, someone told me that the network wanted a more attractive actor, so they swapped out the character. But the character does come back later.
Oh yeah, she gets replaced with a blonde, huh?
Yeah, she gets replaced with a blonde. What's interesting is the actress who plays Lita, the telepath, and we'll talk about telepaths and all that, because again, there's a lot of world building in this. The actress, I looked her up, and she did stunt work in Jurassic Park, bizarrely. And
really?
she played Barbara in the remake of Night of the Living Dead, and I'm like, oh yeah, I vaguely remember that, the Tom Savini directed one.
And she's a lovely looking lady. They were wrong.
Oh yeah, sure. Like, we want someone who would be in a swimsuit calendar for our telepath, please and thank you. Just typical TV. It's clearly something that Straczynski and co. That maybe didn't like that they had to do that, so they fixed it later when they could, when they maybe, I don't know, gain some cred or or whatever. But and go back to Jakar, he's got a very theatrical performance. I love it, and it's maybe something that I love more going forward. But even in this one, the first time you see him, I think he storms into the sort of the control room, the command deck or whatever they call it in this show, and he's coming after Lieutenant Commander Takashima, or not Ivanova, as I was thinking of her throughout the episode, because that's who she's replaced by. And
Ivanova is an upgrade.
Yeah, the actress
is not good.
And I'm not sure if that was officially the excuse for getting rid of her, but I'm going to say that no matter what they said, it's because she wasn't that good, and they wanted to replace her.
We have watched her recently. She was in Picard.
This actress?
She played Commodore O.
That was her?
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit.
Yes, I mean, she had plenty of work after, so good for her. She got better.
Oh, she was in the Man in the High Castle. Oh, she's been in tons of stuff. All right, okay. Well, I'm sorry, Miss Tamita, but your work here was
Babylon
not your
5
best.
was not in your destiny.
Nope, it was
But
not.
that wasn't the end of her career.
But no, I was saying though, the moment where Jacquard comes in, he's like, the way he even just says her name and she kind of sighs a little bit, it's kind of like he's always pestering Command. He's always pestering because he's got things. And he's outraged.
He's always trying to push the limits to see how far he can go, I think.
Yeah, he's
but
outraged.
He uses anger as his vessel in.
Yeah, he's outraged because like his like supply ship, the Narn supply ship won't be let through without this weapons check. And he's like, this is outrageous. I'll make sure someone knows about this. And then he comes by later and he's like, I've had some second thoughts and I've thought about it and we'll submit to your searches. Would that be okay? And he walks off with a little sort of, spring in his step and it's like he's up to something. He's up to something. I think the character introductions in this are very strong for most of the main cast. And the ones that aren't strong are the ones that get replaced for the most part. So
yeah.
It's fair play. So we mentioned Lita. Actually, no, we stick to the aliens first. Delenn. Let's talk about Delenn. Who is Minbari, and that is the race that had a war with Earth about 10 years ago. And there's stuff in there about Commander Sinclair's backstory that's tied to all that. But she's very friendly with Sinclair. There's kind of this like mutual respect and understanding, even when they bring up the war and they bring up the fighting that once took place.
Yeah, she's very she seems to be like the more spiritual side of what we see with the aliens too. I like her introduction a lot. They're just like talking over, her and Sinclair just talking over like a Japanese rock garden, and like how she can see like things that he can't see in his own culture. And I like her introduction. She's an interesting different type of alien that we're getting in this show. It's a good trio of the three aliens that we get.
Joey strikes me about her, and maybe our race as a whole, but certainly her, is that unlike the other two, Jakar and Londo, they both feel like there's kind of an immaturity compared to Delenn, where Delenn feels like she's already been through, or her race has already been through this phase that they're both going through, and they're kind of she's wiser for it. She's wiser, and and maybe that hints as to why, because it's brought up that they basically had the war won, and they surrendered at kind of the last minute for seemingly no reason, and no one understands why. And obviously that's something the show's going to, poke at and reveal as we go. But maybe part of that is this wise kind of maturity, perhaps, and it's probably not. It's probably far more intricate and science fictiony and maybe full of motivations and whatnot. But definitely you get that sense from her. So the Minbari, the Centauri, and the Narn are three main ones, but there's a fourth. In fact, the plot of this episode largely revolves around and there's a lot more alien species on the station, but the final main one of the main kind of five, including the humans, is the Vorlons, and Ambassador Kosh is arriving, and he's very different. He can't breathe in the atmosphere, so he's got this big protective suit, and the race is very secretive about what they look like. No one's allowed to see them outside of their suits, and the plot of the episode, which we'll get to, is about someone trying to kill him. But yeah, so that's kind of our mysterious final member, which they tease things out of the main, because basically, I mean, we don't really explain what Babylon 5 is. It's kind of like a United Nations, almost like a sort of a place for all these different cultures to kind of like hash out differences, diplomatic disputes, that kind of thing.
Right, they're all ambassadors that are
Yes.
stationed on Babylon 5.
Yeah, but it's EarthGov who set it up, which is why there's a human. Well, I don't know if that's why
This
there's
is
a
the
human
fifth
running it,
one. They've tried 4 times and it keeps getting blown up. Well,
Yeah.
except for the 4th one, we don't know what happened to it, right?
Yeah, Lita serves as a kind of an exposition conduit because she just arrives and Sinclair's explaining a bunch of stuff to her. There's so much that comes out of that. One of them is that 1, 2, and 3 all were basically sabotaged very quickly after becoming operational, And the fourth one's the mysterious. Babylon 4 just disappeared within a day of becoming active, and no one knows why or where it went. Like, it's mysterious, and it is interesting because I'm like, oh, I hope they get to that at some point. Let's get to the story of Babylon 4.
And I hope they build Babylon 5 somewhere else.
So that's interesting.
Not in the Bermuda Triangle part of space.
Yeah, I love that. They've got like a jump gate. It's kind of, it operates like they've got like sort of, I don't like we call them teleporters, but they've got like jump gates where the ships come through nearby and then they come to dock. It functions a lot like an airport. There's a lot of like air traffic control from the looks of it,
right?
In terms of how it functions. What do you think of the ship design? We'll get back to the other characters in a minute, but what do you think of the ship design and the? I'm thinking more the interiors here. We'll get to the CG in a minute, because I'm sure you have thoughts.
I have some questions about the design on the interior. Why do all the races that can't breathe oxygen live in a glass cage? For some reason, they like their staterooms or whatever they live in are like there's just one big window. Like they're on display for everybody else to watch. And also the door design. I don't understand the door design. I thought it was silly the first time I watched season 1 of the doors. Why can't they just be regular door shaped? They're like this awkward angle thing. It's still like a door, but on an angle, and then it slides up. It's weird.
I don't have a problem with the doors. I'm cool with them having a fancy door design. I don't have an answer to the other one though. The other question about I mean, I do love the idea that there's sections of the ship that have different atmospheres for different species.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really cool idea.
That is fun.
Yeah. As to why, at least the section we see, because obviously the impression is always that there's much more of it than what we see. Because obviously it's meant to be huge, right? It's meant to be this gigantic space station.
Yeah.
But I don't have an answer. That's a good question.
A lot of the props that are used look to me like they just went to like a Spencer's Gifts or like a Discovery Channel store from in the 90s and like just bought a lot of toys and put them and used them as props. Like some of the like the face mask design for breathing, it all looks very much like, let's just make a science fiction show ourselves and not have any kind of production value. That's why I was holding on to the word prestige for when I compared it to Star Trek, because it is in the shadow of this prestige show. Even if it's, I mean, it did premiere after Deep Space Nine, but even if it's just being compared to the Next Generation at the time, like, which maybe is unfair, but like the prop design and the costume design, it all looks very much like a do-it-yourself show. Oh,
it's much lower budget. Although I'm not sure how much of that, from what I remember, sticks into the main show. Because I think this first TV pilot is it is rough around the edges for sure. I'm not sure how much of that changes going into the rest of it.
But like Sinclair's room has like this celestial globe that I swear you can buy at the Discovery Channel store. There was a store for it in a lot of malls, or like Sharper Image or something.
Do you know what? I honestly think a lot of this gives it some charm. One of the things that I loved the first time I watched this is how, like, as much as it doesn't make sense from a modern perspective, because obviously when we think of futuristic stuff now, everything's got holograms and everything's got fancy touch screens and whatnot. I kind of love that this is like a retro future where there's like, there's buttons, there's keypads for everything. At one point, he hands him some information, and instead of it being like a little like holographic data pad like you see in a sci-fi show now, it's a laminated card. And I'm like, that's amazing. He just gave him a laminated card. What did he go? Did he just go and get it? Did Garibaldi go and get it laminated? Oh yeah, I need to laminate this little card of information before I give it to the captain.
Hey, some species I'm sure have very sweaty hands. Like you don't want to give them an unlaminated sheet.
There you go.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's just that I like a little bit of prop design instead of just let's just go to Goodwill and see what we could pick up.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if that's something that improves when we get to show. I honestly can't remember. It wasn't something that I necessarily fixated on, I have to say, though.
I remember the clothes didn't improve. There's one episode that's like burned in my mind that I'm pretty sure they just asked the guys to show up in their best like party outfits because it looked like straight out of 1994.
Hey, I mean, this is low on the list of priorities. The writing is number one.
I agree.
Props
I agree.
are
There's a little bit of
somewhere
charm to it, and I think the special effects also,
well,
which we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, something I was saving to say, because I was tempted to say it when you were talking about the props, but I want to say it more for the CG, right? Because the CG, which is famously was rendered on an Amiga, which for those of you who are younger than us, which there are many of you now, unfortunately, that's just an old computer.
Fortunately, the race of mankind depends on you.
I don't know. I don't know if we should last that much longer. We've had a good run. But it's been a terrible run. Absolute garbage. Trash.
We really did a bad job.
The Barry should have just wiped us all out. Took over.
There's still time.
But hey, I mean, hell, that this show does get very political. It does get very, it starts to really dig into a lot of serious themes. But anyway, the CG though, it does look like FMV from like a video game from maybe not quite the same like era, but maybe later in the 90s. Like if you think of like an FMV from like maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, it kind of whenever you
I'm thinking like Wing Commander 2.
Whenever you cut to an exterior of the ship, or the station I should say, and the ships that are coming in and out of it, the funny thing is though, is as much as I hate a lot of bad CG, especially in modern things or even stuff from like the 2000s, there is something fundamentally different, and it's something you were kind of bringing up with the props and things like that. Is to me that there is something really charming about this low budget show with people who really care about it. Say, oh, let's just do this on Amiga. We can do it. We can do it ourselves. Compared to some $50 million movie that just says, oh, have some FX company knock it out in a day. It looks rushed and bad.
I don't think that a good show can hide, or a bad show can hide behind good special effects. Like, I think you still need to have the fundamentals there. And they're here, like, the main characters that do work, that do stay, like, there's a reason for it. They're great. And I think the idea works, especially because I am a fan of Deep Space Nine and I know it works. But
it's a fair point. It's a fair point. I think it is. It's got a lot of those pilot problems, right? It's got the actual plot and how some of it plays out, and so much of it is about sort of trying to show us that Jakar is devious and schemes and whatnot. I don't know if like this plot is great on its own, but it does lead to a lot of little mythology things that are kind of useful for later. So like I said,
there's one other thing I wanted to bring up about the prop design or the set design. There's a part of the ship where they're on like a monorail of some type, like a
yes,
and they're all strapped in with like those Six Flags Magic Mountain roller coaster things. And they look so uncomfortable. Like all the actors look like they're just dangling, and this is awkward, and it looks so silly. That's all. I just wanted to say that. That's when I texted you. I said, "Oh my god, this show's silly."
that was the moment that inspired that message.
That was the moment that broke me. I had to say something.
Okay. Actually, no, before we get to the plot, some other mythology stuff I want to get to. Telepaths. We're even talking about Lita, because Lita, comes on board. She's human, gets a tour, all that. In fact, what's important is that most of the species can be telepaths. Notably, the one exception is the Narn, which leads to one of my favorite scenes of this episode, actually, which is so. Not only do we have the idea that telepaths exist, and there's something called a psychor, right? Which, by the way, your man Chekhov from Star Trek is going to be in that later in the season, so
I remember.
Look forward to that. But we see how she functions, why she's on the ship, and there's like a sort of business deal going on between these two businessmen, and one guy's saying, "Oh, you could have these things ready by that date," and she's like, "He's lying. It's going to be at least 3 days later." And he's like, "Oh, whoever had the idea to have psychics like monitor business dealings? I want to shoot them." And he's like really mad, and he storms off. And I'm like, okay, this is really cool. This is not only is it mythology, but it's saying here are the practical applications of this and why it's used, right?
I imagine like you wouldn't want to do dealings if somebody brings a psychic with them, but at least it's all on the table. Like, hey, I'm not trying to hide it. I brought a psychic.
Well, I think I got the impression that it's not even necessarily that he hired her. It's more she's on the station to be there because this is something that's just expected. It's like a,
Mm.
I don't know, like a, maybe it's a rule even that they have to have a sidekick present for things like this.
She's the Deanna Troy.
But more useful.
I don't disagree.
I mean, I watched the episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation today, which I'll be reviewing with Connor tomorrow, presumably. And that was a loud car. And I'll be, and there's a moment in that episode where literally like 4 characters basically say how untrustworthy someone is, and it gets to choice like, yes, he's definitely lying. He's being devious. He's trying to trick us. Like all 4 characters who have already spoken all said that. You're legitimately useless. You're so redundant. Anyway, but afterwards, this really interesting scene where Jakar, who's popping in a lot of a lot of scenes, he's interacting with a lot of characters, and he comes in and he's like, "Hey, may I speak with you?" And they introduce this privacy thing, which I'm not sure if they ever bring up. I mean, maybe they do it later, but I don't remember it ever popping up from what I watched. Where it's sort of like it's basically a silence kind of cone around them. You don't see anything, it's lights on the floor, but he basically, this is where we find out that the Narn have no telepaths. Like, they're the only species, or only major species anyway, that don't have telepaths, and how it's a disadvantage that they don't have that. And it's actually a really funny scene, and a lot of it is down to his performance, where he just kind of casually, says, "Well, we'd like to, take some of your genes and try and, make some telepaths and adapt it and give it to our race." Now, we could do it this way where we clone you or whatever, but that's, it's a lot of time and money, so we'd pay you less for that. Just mating would be quicker. And she has this look of shock on her face. And my favourite line, if I have a critique of this scene, is that it should have cut to the next scene when she looks shocked at this next line, is when he says, "Now, would you prefer to be conscious or unconscious while we mate?" And the look at her face, the scene goes for like another 30 seconds or whatever.
It's very much just a business deal.
Yeah, but yeah, he's like deadpan. There's no like hint of flirtation or anything like that. He's like, oh yes, my partner's authorized and she's willing. All this is for the. You get the idea that the Narn are all very kind of dedicated to their overall like culture. They're all loyal soldiers.
And he also brings up like, I just need to know what your pleasure threshold is.
Yes, and then that's a follow-up to the sleep question. The idea being that if she's awake, it might be too good. She might erupt from pleasure.
He says it's so, just so deadpan that it doesn't seem like he's boasting.
No, he's it's just straight up saying that you're a human and you humans have crap sex. This is just known.
Yes, I can imagine Worf saying something like that.
Yeah. Obviously, they're very different characters. Like, they're not even remotely close. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I could see Worf saying something like that about humans not being able to take. Yeah, I'm sure I've heard him say something like that. So I love this scene. I love this scene because it was Jakar obviously is a big plot function in a lot of Babylon 5 that I've seen, but he can be so funny at playing off of certain characters.
Right.
He's so good. Him and Londo back and forth is great.
Yeah, definitely.
So, the other kind of mythology stuff is actually seen later on where Jakar does the rounds in this episode. He kind of interacts with almost all the main characters. He goes to Delenn, and it's after the assassination attempt has happened, and I think it might even be after they suspect that Sinclair, after they think Sinclair's the one who's tried to kill him. And he's talking to Delenn, and a big bit of mythology comes out of this scene as well, where he says, because he tries to form an alliance, again, very devious, very scheming. He's like, I came to talk about an alliance between our two cultures.
The war wasn't that long ago, so maybe the wounds are still fresh.
And he's like, and when she turns him down, he because he says the line is, imagine what we our two people could accomplish together, and she's like, no, I can't imagine it, which is why it can't happen. Again,
and then she uses some kind of like technology on him.
Well, I think what's more notable is why she does that. It's what he mentions. He mentions that the rumors are that it was the Grey Council, I think is the name, that made this choice, and she immediately uses this like it's like a ring that makes him sort of feel pain from the inside, and threatens them to never mention that the Grey Council ever again. This is one of these things, actually, having seen more of it, I'd forgotten this was even brought up in the first episode in The Gathering. I wasn't expecting this when I was sitting down to watch it again today. So
I don't really remember much of the Grey Council, if that comes back. I'm sure it does, but
it come up a little bit from what I saw. Obviously, I expect it to come up even more as we go further, but so that's another big mythology thing that I think really sticks out amongst it. I'm sure there's lots of other little things that I've not quite mentioned. Maybe they'll come up as we talk about the plot, which I think we can get to now. But yeah, basically, Kosh arrives and immediately, they find him kind of like falling over, seemingly poisoned, and there's a lot of talk again the mythology stuff here that's really interesting is how strict they are about anyone seeing them and all these things, to the point where it's kind of a big deal that Sinclair like says to Dr.
Kyle.
Is it Kyle? I'm scanning.
Benjamin Kyle.
Yeah, Benjamin Kyle. There you go. It's a big deal. He's like, well, you've got patient doctor confidentiality. That's good enough for me. And a part of me thought is, okay, I get that you want to save him, so I'll kind of justify that you're doing it for the right reasons. But I mean, do you think the Vorlons care about like our doctor-patient rules? I don't think they give a shit. They ain't going to be happy about this at all.
I think they would be less happy if he died, though, right?
Well, true, yeah, they're ready to attack the station, and they're like demanding Sinclair's, head when they think it's him for a period of time. And then, of course, the idea that Lita, without seeing him, but does go in and like, scan him, which again, she doesn't want her license revoked. She could be made to disappear because she's done an unauthorized scan without consent from next of kin or whatever. And that's how she sees that Sinclair seemingly is the one who's murdered. And I do kind of like that none of the main characters, and by main characters I mean Garibaldi, who's the chief of security, Takashima, Dr. Kyle, or even Lita, none of them actually think it's him, really. Like, they all kind of immediately say, okay, there's something fishy about this. And
right. It can't be the commander, so it has to be something else.
yeah, I mean, Jacquard's walking around being like, oh, he's done this.
Lita sort of accuses him because she gets that reaction right after after she mind melts.
She has the cliffhanger where she's like, it was you. Bit over the top, bit on the cheesy side, I'll admit. That moment.
Yeah.
What we're actually dealing with here is a shapeshifter, because there's like a mysterious character, a shady looking guy who's like creeping around in the first half of the episode.
Yeah,
but
wearing plaid.
Yeah.
Very shady.
But then it turns out that he probably wasn't that shady. Like the real person wearing plaid's already dead, and it's this shapeshifter. Well, I say shapeshifter. It's technology to achieve, it's like a hologram kind of thing over their body.
Mm-hmm. But there's a cost. It drains the person, and it becomes very dangerous.
Yeah, it actually turns out to be a Minbari, which I thought was a cool little thing to like. Oh, hey, yeah, it doesn't have to be a human. Like, it can literally be any one of these species that we've set up.
Right.
could be behind this. There's obviously a lot of hints that Jacquard's behind it. He meets the shapeshifter when the shapeshifter is presenting herself as Lita, but it's like, it's clearly the Minbari. It's clearly the assassin as opposed to her. If I have some critiques of like stuff that plays out in the plot, I would say that the fight when the assassin goes looking like Lita to try and kill the ambassador in the med bay. When she's like hitting the doctor with like a big sort of like beam or whatever it is, I thought that looked a little bit silly because it was very clearly like TV, like not even close to actually hitting them, and he's like and he was just like In fact, that's one of the things that, because I know it's better in the actual show, the music's really disappointing in The Gathering, because I really like the music in the main show.
Yeah, you're right. I don't really like it either. It's just it feels very cheap, and I thought I remember enjoying the music well enough in the show.
To the point where when I got to the end and I started humming the main theme from the show, because I'm like, damn, the music's going to get good. The next episode, the music's going to be great. But this obviously, I would even surprise me if the music here wasn't even composed for this. It might just be like generic
just
stock. Yeah, library stuff. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Doctor in this show either. I don't think he sticks around either, right?
No, he's gone. That may have just been a retirement thing because he's only got like one credit after this. I think he was maybe just ready to hang up the
Yeah.
acting.
Thought he'd
Boots.
give one show another try and then said, "Ooh, I don't know. It's been picked up."
Yeah. It's worth mentioning, from what I recall, they do kind of, maybe not right away, but they do explain the people who have left in some fashion at some point.
Yeah, I think I remember that too.
I think it ties into the fact that he saw a Vorlon. Like, they actually used that as kind of part of like he's kind of like a big deal now because he saw a Vorlon.
Yeah. Because they asked, who is it? The Takashima asked him at the end, like, what was his experience like seeing the Vorlon, and he goes into this like ethereal, almost like I saw the face of God or something, and now I'll never be the same. And I think he's just playing it up because he knows nobody else will ever see one. So just trying to impress the lady.
I like that idea, actually. I like the idea that it's actually kind of dull. It's just kind of whatever.
Well, I'm the only one who'll know, so
Yeah.
I'll just play this up.
Oh, it was amazing. You wouldn't believe it. It was transcendent.
Yes.
Yes. So a big portion of the episode is once Sinclair is the suspect, there's kind of like a trial, where the council, where the main ambassadors come together to kind of try. Takashima is sort of given Sinclair, because obviously Sinclair can't try himself. Makes sense. So we have kind of a little thing. This is actually one of the few times where the technology they kind of like show off these little drones that have cameras. I'm like, oh, that's actually not that far fetched. That actually, we kind of have that now. They're obviously bigger and have these little, more tech visible as opposed to these little floating like UFO looking things. But
Right.
the idea's the same.
Yeah. Yeah, it was alright.
Makes sense. But Jakar's being shady, and he makes a little deal with Londo off the side. And this is actually kind of thing we were talking about earlier, where Londo's shown to be having kind of a heart, despite the fact that he is kind of mischievous. Because he
You believe
votes.
that he's being sincere, even though like he isn't really. He only makes the decision because he doesn't think he has to live with the consequences because of the situation. But
Yeah, he agrees to vote
he seems to regret it. Yeah.
for Sinclair to be like basically extradited to the Vorlon homeworld for trial, and Takashima votes no. Delenn votes or abstains, to be more accurate. Jakar obviously votes yes, and it's like, well, it's a tie because it's 2-4 and 2 either against or abstaining. But it's like, no, but Kosh would have a vote too, and the Vorlons have voted, and they've said yes. But I know, I do think genuinely one of my favorite scenes of the episode is when Londo comes to Mr. Garibaldi, which is I'm only saying it that because Londo always calls him Mr. Garibaldi.
How could you not?
Which is why he's got the most memorable name in the whole show, because Londo always says it that way.
That's true.
But he comes to him and sort of comes clean and says, look, Jakar came to see me, and my grandfather committed some atrocities during the heyday of the Centauri Empire, and I couldn't let that get out. But I didn't think it mattered because I thought it was going to be a tie. I didn't know he'd contacted the Vorlons. And he admits that if he did know that, he probably still would have made the same choice. But he's sorry. And it's kind of a sweet moment. Up until this point, their relationship has been, Londo's a bit of a mad gambler and he wants Garibaldi to lend him some money, and Gar was like, fat chance. Like, it's all been kind of comedy up until this point.
Garibaldi always seems like I don't know if he's like a security guy
He's
in the
security chief.
show. He
Yeah.
is security chief?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, he's kind of like the Constable Odo and Quark relationship in Deep Space Nine. I mean, very much so.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
I'll get there at some point.
That's why I'm here, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
To point out the similarities.
Yeah, but I love this scene though, because all the stuff so far has been comedy. Them having this sweet moment actually plays really well. Like it makes you feel a bit more. I don't know, just to have a bit more of a bit more weight to it. And it's scenes like this that, even though some of this episode's a bit rough around the edges and there's some cheesier elements, it's this type of scene that sort of gives me the kind of there's like, there's a spark here. There's something on top of all the mythology, the character stuff here is a spark to what might become great TV stuff later. Because I think Garibaldi, like Jerry Doyle, who plays him, he's not necessarily a great actor per se, but I think he's
but there's something very likable about him.
I think he's very good in this role. It reminds me a lot of like other TV actors. To go back to like let me think of an example. I'll just use Buffy, okay? Right. Nicholas Brendan as Xander, like he's very good as Xander, but he's not necessarily someone like, and okay, we saw him in Coherence not that long ago, and he was actually pretty good in that, but he's not someone who really had much of a career elsewhere. He's not someone who, if I ever saw him pop up in another TV show, came across as particularly great as an actor. But he was really good at that one role, and I feel like Doyle as Garibaldi here, he is immediately quite likable. Even he has some mythology. There's like sort of hints that he has a bit of a a kind of a not a dark past, but like a past that he's unproud of, and Sinclair like hiring him for this position was kind of controversial because of his past, and he's I think it mentions in this episode that he is a recovering alcoholic. I think it mentions that at one point.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Because Londo wants him to party.
That's right. Yes. Yes.
He's got some skeletons in his closet, and I do think he's really likable. Does he remind you of like a young, not younger, but like a lesser Bruce Willis? I think they kind of look similar, or maybe it's the attitude or something. I don't know. But he's definitely more likable than Bruce Willis.
Do you know what? My answer's no, but you're making me think about it, and I can kind of see why you're saying it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I can kind of see why you're saying it. He's kind of like it's like if John McClane was more of a couch potato, and I mean that lovingly. I do mean that lovingly.
Yeah.
Because I like him, but yes. Normal guy, John McClane. I mean, the whole point of John McClane is supposed to feel normal anyway, but I mean...
Yeah, he was always kind of an action guy, though.
But he's movie normal. He's more normal.
Yeah. Normal doesn't include six-pack.
Yes. Of course, obviously, they get the whiff. They're investigating the various bodies they're finding and realise that these people who are supposed to have been seen at some point were already dead, and they track this tech that's used to causing the shape-shifting. The weird, like, we'll call it SWAT gear that Garibaldi and Sinclair put on is a bit goofy, I'll admit. It's big, like, foam padding, essentially.
Yeah.
Do you know what I do like, though? Do you know what I do love, though? See when they're, like, hunting the assassin? I do love, this is something you don't get in TV as much anymore, is that when they're going through these dark corridors, there's like steam coming off of various parts, there's like light coming through the grates and stuff. It's just old school, let's make it feel like a ship or sci-fi, you know?
Sure, yeah.
Let's make it feel industrial and stuff. I don't know, I like that.
There wasn't enough water leaking, but yeah, I understand.
Oh, Babylon 5 is a better run ship than that, or a better run station than that.
Than the Nostromo?
Yes. Nostromo's basically just a semi-container truck that's making a long haul. It's leaky and nasty. Babylon 5's...
It's a lot of condensation.
Yeah, Babylon 5's... it's maybe a prestigious place where
right. It's very
delegates
clean.
go. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's no.
It's okay. I do find a lot of the costuming to be kind of endearing, and the extras that they use, they just look like anybody in the 90s who owned a suit. I don't know. There is something very endearing about it.
No. It brings a smile to my face for the most part. The episode, like, I do think it needed to be longer than a regular episode. There's a lot of stuff to pack in here. Maybe a couple of things maybe they could have held back on. Did we have to tease the Grey Council in this one? I don't know if we did. But I do think there's maybe a little pacing where I could have maybe have cut like maybe 5-10 minutes out of it just to like tighten up a little bit. Particularly,
this probably could have been a regular size episode.
No, I disagree with that. I would disagree with that because that's half the length. I think one of the things that I say over and over with pilots in the modern age is that they're all too stuffed, and they all suffer from trying to setting up stuff. Like, there's so much in this. I mean, that moment between Garibaldi and Londo, which I think is one of the best scenes of the episode, I don't think that would be there if we cut this down to a right. And the same with maybe even the stuff with Jakar and Lita. Like, that stuff might have been cut. Like, there's so many good things here building up the world that I think it does have to be longer, but maybe more like 80 minutes instead of 95. I guess is what I'm saying.
Maybe just Could have used another rewrite. Maybe jazz up some of those scenes that feel a little slow.
It does feel very proof of concept. You kind of feel like they're working out the kinks a lot in a lot of it.
Well, yeah. I mean, half the cast is gone in the next one.
That's true. But for the better, for the most part, though.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say. So I think there's a very endearing quality to this this episode, and it's there's some little touches at the end that I really like Delenn kind of like feeling ashamed that the assassin was Minbari and trying to kind of patch things up, and getting kind of a little uneasy because one of the other big mythology things that we haven't mentioned yet actually is that Sinclair was in the Battle of the Line, which was the last battle of the war, the Earth Minbari War, and he was a fighter pilot. He was in a squad, and a lot of his squad got wiped out, and then he kind of lost time. He lost 24 hours where he woke up and the war was over. The Minbari had surrendered, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And
yeah, because the Minbari that dies in this episode tells him that you have a hole in your mind or something, and Delenn tries to play it off as like, oh, that's just something we say in our culture, but then Sinclair goes, well, but I do have a hole in my mind. Like I have a gap in my mind, like 24 hours, and it has to do with Minbari War, so they have to be connected.
Yeah, I appreciate our attempt at that, but it does come across if it's the sort of thing that I might try and pull with you if I say something really stupid. I'm like, oh, that's just a Scottish thing.
Oh yeah, I mean I grew up in another country and then moved to. I mean, I grew up in Canada and then moved here in middle school to the U.S. in middle school. So yeah, I played that all the time. I played that card a lot. Oh, it's just something we say in Canada.
Yeah. If you say something stupid and someone calls you out, just go, eh? Oh.
That's how we spell it in Canada.
I don't know what you're talking about. And then just walk off. just say some Canadian things and walk away.
I don't speak American, only Canadian.
Yeah. So no, I don't think it's the strongest example of an episode by any means. And having seen, a good 2/3 or so of the season previously, I know that it is better and whatnot. But I do think there's a lot of endearing things in this. There's a lot of very 90s low budget TV kind of scenes, especially whenever there's like a fight, for example. But the stuff that it's like setting up and the stuff that I know that this show is known for, the mythology, all the politics, the different races, the disputes that play out over time, the scheming, the history, all that stuff is already it's already bubbling away. It's already a little tantalizing. It's already there's this, and what does that play into that, and all these characters.
Yeah, I think the concept is very strong. I think the 3 lead alien ambassadors are very, very like I want to know more about their history and their lore. I find it very enticing, when they start talking about the stuff on the side and about their history with each other. The one thing I don't love in this, the one character that they did not replace is unfortunately Sinclair. I don't like Sinclair. I think he's so dull, and I know there's issues and things that get brought up later, but as far as his performance in this and his character, I think they were stuck with him because they said that he was the last captain of the Babylon 5 station, and
that's a good point.
They have to stick to their guns.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's actually just incorrect, because they had to replace him in season 2, obviously for unfortunate real world reasons, but
right. But I think for this pilot reason, and then the reason they didn't recast him for the next episode was because they already set up that was it, and they didn't get rid of him until they were forced to. Their hands were forced. That's
you assuming that they shared your opinion that he wasn't that good, because I don't think he's that bad.
I think he's pretty dull.
I mean, he's kind of Joey reminds me of in a weird way. He's a bit of he's the noble kind of Guru Two Shoes. He's got a little bit of, and I just mean a smidge, but he's got a little bit of that Superman quality where he's always about doing the right thing. Even a little Picard.
I think a lot of characters could have done that with a bit more personality.
I mean, possibly, but he has that thing where at one point when Garibaldi and Takashima are kind of talking about, oh, we should do this, and Sinclair's like, no, like the fate of the station and what we're trying to achieve, like the peace we're trying to build, because through this station is more important than any one of us, and that includes me. Like, I kind of like that speech. So maybe he's a little bit dry.
I think it's unfortunate that he's acting like next to like Peter Jurassic or Andreas Katsoulas Jakar, because they're both really good, and even the woman who plays Delenn, I think she's really excellent. I don't think that Michael Hare is up to their standard. Even the guy who plays Garibaldi, like, he has a lot more. He seems like he's kind of dull, but I don't know. There's something about him that is really sweet, and I just like him. Like, he's super likable.
Well, look forward to Bruce Box later in season 2 then.
Well, I know he does get replaced, and for unfortunate reasons. But I don't like. I honestly I don't like the character of Sinclair.
Actually, one thing
I just don't think he's as good.
One thing I would cut from the episode, actually, that I don't think serves that much purpose, especially since either the character changes or they just sort of change it because they had to change it the actor, but the love interest, which is only a few scenes, admittedly, but Sinclair has this friend who arrives in the ship, and they have a romantic night together. She's kind of brought up during the trial to kind of, as a suspect, like as a what do we call it, accomplice to what he's maybe done, and it upsets him. But it never really serves too much of a purpose, other than maybe to say that he's dedicated to his post and his job, and he cares about this to the point where he's not willing to go and start a new life with her. It's the Kirk thing. No, he cares more about being this commander and doing his mission than he does having a personal life, which is a fine thing to maybe do. But he could have waited. You could have done this later in the show. You didn't have to do it in the first episode necessarily. So I'd have cut that maybe. And we should mention actually the scene at the end where he does actually confront Jakar, knowing full well that he was he's behind whatever happened. And it turns it into kind of a comedy thing where he says that he tricked him into drinking this nanite sensor, this tracker it'll probably dissolve in about 5 years, but until then we're going to know where you are, and if anything happens to this station, like my people will come for you. And it's just a bluff, because the idea being, if there is something and they find it, they'll remove it. But if they think there's something and they keep not being able to find it, then they're just going to keep looking.
Probably through lots of pain.
Probably through lots of pain, yeah.
Yeah, painful procedures. I did find that really funny too. That was a good scene. Especially
when he walks out and this is the scene where Londo and Garibaldi come out the elevator and they're kind of talking about the Centauri past and all that, and Garibaldi, knowing what Sinclair was going to do, is like beep beep as he walks past, and Londo's like beep beep, what's that? And Jakar just goes, oh, and he walks off, and that made me laugh. And that was kind of a hint of the stuff between Jakar and Londo that I love, is like just them, and this is kind of almost an unintentional thing. He's like, these humans, I don't get their comedy. Beep beep, what's that?
Yeah, it was funny. It's a good note to end on too, because it seems like, is he willing to like go to that level in order to I don't know, to keep his authority on the ship or on the space station? Like, it seems kind of like a dick thing to do, but you're like, oh no, it's not really there. He's just bluffing. Yeah. So it's not so bad.
I wonder if you'll stop accidentally calling it a ship at any point, or if it's just going to be something we do for the whole show. Because it's a station. We know it's a station. But it's so easy to call it a ship instead by accident.
Right.
But yeah. That's basically The Gathering. Lots of good character stuff, good world building, and some 90s TV, cheese. But I think that's something we'll take as we go. There's going to be episodes that maybe have a bit much of that, and I think there's going to be a lot of good world building though. So, so we're going to be here. We're going to be doing this every week. Occasionally every other week when there's another show that has to sort of take up some of the schedule. But this is going to be us going forward. And I did say at the start I would explain if you wondered why we're starting from scratch, if you caught the fact that I did the first 16, 17 episodes late 2018, I want to say. I think that was when I did this. Basically, it'd been long enough. We were talking about wanting to do something, and Babylon 5 was something that was kind of, it's like, hey, it's kind of an obvious choice for various reasons. And it'd been long enough that I couldn't just continue. I had to watch everything again. I had to start from the scratch. Even if I was going to continue where I left off review wise, I'd have to watch everything again just so I'd have it all in my mind again and refresh all my memory. And Tara
Yeah, because
having
it is a long format storytelling here.
yeah.
You're not dealing with like an anthology episode style.
Yeah, it's not procedural. It's not like episodes of the week for the most part. I mean, there is episodes of the week sort of plots, but there's always this world building behind it. There's always these things building. And Tara had seen some of it as well, but again, it had been a while, and it was like, well, if we're going to have to watch it from the start anyway, we might as well have a series of reviews where it's both of us from the start. So this is why we're here. So if you were waiting for a long time for Babylon 5 to come back, and you're like, wait, it's at the start again, it's
we were
here to
debating
stay.
just skipping Babylon 5 and doing something else, but
Yeah.
it made the most sense to just go to Babylon 5 since it does have such a big fan base, and
Yes. And people seem to like
people
that was-
want to listen to at least Peter review them because I think those videos did okay.
No, I mean, people seem to be into it, and I'm sure they will appreciate your insight and your perspective, especially as someone who maybe, I mean, you clearly still.
I've watched the competition.
Yeah, at least you. I mean, you still enjoyed this clearly, and still appreciate a lot of what it's doing, but you were definitely a bit more critical than I was, and maybe that, the bad cop, as it were, is a good thing to have going forward.
It's not
to
a role
challenge.
that I'm used to.
Yeah, I'm good cop for a change. It's nice. Nice. They're going to love me and hate you. So different from normal.
I know that the show gets good. I mean, I don't know personally. I've been told. I'm
Yes.
willing to give it, a season to start being good cop again.
Yes, it's reputation. Yes. So, but
I
no.
remember there being a couple of standout episodes too.
Oh, there's a couple of
One
great
where, like
ones.
Londo Falls in Love that I really liked.
There's a couple of great ones. There's a one that ends with I mean, I don't want to get spoilers, but let's just say there's a transcendent episode, kind of like early Sean, that I really liked. Episode 13, I think it was, is a really big one for setting up the plot of the show. It almost really feels like everything up until 13 is kind of a prologue. In fact, hell, the seasons have names. This is kind of a rare thing where the seasons on DVD have names. So it's like season 1's got a title, season 2's got a title, and season 1 is like preludes and something. It's the title's clearly like this is the prelude to the rest of the thing. So no, I'm not looking at it. That's why I can't remember exactly what it is. I'm sure someone in the comments will happily tell us. But if you are happy that Babylon 5 is officially back and we're going to stick with it, it's going to be both. And, I know, obviously, there's a bit of a trust that's broken when I start something and don't finish it. But I think you can look at Star Trek, you can look at us two doing Twilight Zone, you can look at these things, or me and Connor doing all of Twin Peaks, or all the leftovers, that there is a commitment and we do finish things, we do stick with things, and we will be here to stay. So this is our Babylon 5 review. So if you enjoyed this and are looking forward to more, please do hit the like button. Liking is super important on YouTube. It's a nice easy way for you to support us, and it makes more people find us. YouTube sort of like pumps us out a little bit more in the algorithm, and it's all really boring words and it sounds all a bit cold and sterile, but it's actually a really good way of helping us. You can support us financially. Where can you do that, Tara?
That's right. If you enjoyed the content and the show and want to get more, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/ManifestTV. And if you donate as little as $1 per month, you will get access to bonus episodes of shows we do, including the Ace, which is our science fiction movie review show. And if you donate $5 per month, you will get access to, I think, already canceled 1 week early.
Yes.
Yes? Including Babylon 5?
Including Babylon 5. You get a week early on Patreon, yeah, with $5 tier.
And you'll get our Twilight Zone reviews early, and Star Trek. So please check it out. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah. I was thinking of something we have to do in the back end. It's not relevant to the people though. So thank you for enjoying Babylon 5. And please do let us know what you think of the episode, the gathering, in the comments. And we'll be back next week with episode 1 of season 1. So yeah, that's us. Guys on Twitter at @mail_fuzz for channel updates. And I think that's everything I need to tell you. So yeah, thank you once more. I don't have a good outro for this, actually. I most of these old shows I give a specific outro. Twilight Zone's got one. Star Trek's got. Hell, Star Trek gets a new one every season. It sounds like these days.
Well, maybe season 1, episode 1 will give you something to work with.
Yes. Okay.
You could just shout Mr. Garibaldi.
That's what I was thinking. It was the one thing that was sticking out in my mind. Is like,
Make sure you like flare your hair up first in the back
I mean,
and show your fangs.
yeah, that's right. He's got like, longer fangs. That's a good point. That's the other physical feature that he's got. Is a little bit different as Londo. But yeah,
He's a little bit of a Dracula, like the what is it? The Francis Ford Coppola design with the neck crest thing of hair and fangs.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right. Well, and anyway, if you have any troubles on the station or on the channel, just make sure to get the head of security. He's not hard to find. His name is Mr. Garibaldi.